Please start by briefly introducing yourselves, including your organizations and roles.
My name is Cathy Lin. I'm the Director of Research at IDA, the International Downtown Association. And IDA is the premier association of urban place managers who are shaping and activating dynamic downtowns, city centers, and neighborhood districts. So our members, which include business improvement districts, business improvement alliances, downtown partnerships, et cetera, really work at the intersection of the private and public sectors across a multitude of areas, including clean and safe operations, economic development, placemaking, and planning and design.
My name is Jonathan Tinney. I'm a principal in Stantec's Urban Places division based in Toronto, Canada. My role, or sort of the work that we do in our group, is really looking at the intersection between infrastructure, people, and places, and how they can support vibrancy, economic development, especially within the downtowns of our cities.
So what is the Building on Recovery for Urban Place Management report, and what were your roles in creating it?
So we wanted to create this report because we know downtowns and dense urban districts were disproportionately impacted by the effects of the pandemic. So this report really presents a framework for urban place management organizations, a framework of key actions to help them navigate a successful recovery. So we know that's going to look a little bit different in each community, but there's this overall set of guiding principles that each community is already doing and will continue to do for the recovery. So together with our partners at Stantec, we hosted focus group sessions and really work together on additional research to write this report.
From our perspective as Stantec, we've got a long history of partnering with the IDA, as well as with a number of different downtown agencies across North America. And so in this case, we offered some technical expertise as well as some support in the facilitation of those engagements, and really, I think, try to put our heads together with all of the various different agencies to ensure that we were, capturing all of the great work that they were doing, and really helping focus the idea of a toolkit for moving forward and going towards the future and recovery for all of those downtown areas.
So while you're sharing some of the highlights from the report, can you also say what has not been reported in other news and other reports that was in your report?
We often heard, especially early on in the pandemic, about how this was going to be the demise of downtowns, it's the end of dense cities, but really that hasn't been the case. And what we're really excited about is how we've been seeing urban place management organizations that are turning this crisis into an opportunity to build on downtown strengths and advocate for a better city. So for instance, one of the most interesting examples we've seen is with the Downtown Austin Alliance in Austin, Texas. And they created a really comprehensive roadmap to recovery and resilience. So in the short term, it's setting 4 critical priorities: addressing unsheltered homelessness, activating parks and public spaces, supporting small businesses and live music, and promoting downtown. But longer term, the Downtown Austin Alliance is also championing several opportunities that will transform downtown with infrastructure and placemaking. Some of those ideas include things like capping the I-35 highway and creating new waterfront neighborhoods.
Cathy spoke about this sort of specifics. I think in general, it is that theme that Austin really demonstrates. It's there was a real interest, I think, within the conversation. First off, to sort of share some learnings around how everybody managed the sort of day-to-day and the triaging of some of the challenges that we faced. I think some of the other things that we saw, places like Chicago and Montreal, where they've been pushing for looking specifically at engagement with the downtown downtown landlords to really gauge and gain information on the return to work program of some of those tenants. That's sort of the biggest kind of outstanding sort of challenge or piece of the puzzle that is yet to start to come back is all of those downtown workers. And so I think some of those, and they weren't the only ones, there were a number of other agencies who have really taken a hard look at engaging with those landlords to ensure that they're managing the return to work process. But I think in general, I think a lot of those agencies are really looking at what this looks like beyond the pandemic and how they can springboard some of the learnings from this process into even stronger downtowns going forward.
What were some surprises you learned while working on the report?
It's more about how the breadth of what urban place management organizations do just never ceases to surprise me. And the recovery from COVID is no exception. So it's really just an incredible amount of new initiatives that downtown organizations have been doing. So, everything from small business engagement to serving on city task forces, to creating programs for pop-up art and vacant storefronts, building out streeteries, doing the return to office campaigns. It's really covering kind of every aspect that that downtowns cover. So it's really, I think, just further emphasizing what we see in our industry on place management organizations being really nimble and able to pilot all sorts of new initiatives.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a surprise. Although as a planner by training, I guess it shouldn't be a surprise. But the willingness of people to embrace sort of new approaches to public space in the downtowns, and the nimbleness of these downtown management organizations to take advantage of that, and the creation of all of these new outdoor dining, outdoor public spaces, the reclamation of city streets, that real shift and focus on the public realm, whether it's sort of large interventions or even just the small makeshift ones, or taking up a parking space. The willingness of downtowns to try those new things, and the willingness of the public to embrace them and use them to find that kind of connection, create some vitality, given some of the challenges we've seen over the last 17 months. That was, sort of surprising and heartwarming at the same time.
So the word inclusion was often mentioned in the report. Why is that so important, and how can it be brought about or encouraged?
During the pandemic and the calls for racial justice last year, they really underscored the deep racial inequities that we face. And when we work in downtowns are often the representative image that people have of their city. And so we, as place managers and stewards of this critical gathering and civic center, are really, have always been, but are really putting a new emphasis now on striving towards making downtowns inclusive of everyone in the community, because they are so central to the city and region. And downtowns offer the highest concentrations of opportunities and resources, and that needs to be accessible to everyone. So what we see in our research and in the report is that where place management organizations are thinking about inclusion at all levels. So sometimes that's internally, whether evaluating diversity within the organization itself or at the board level, but also by creating programming that's more diverse for the broader community. So that's both doing programming that's welcoming to all groups, but also programming that's focused on equity. So another example that I like to highlight is one from the Downtown Partnership of Baltimore. And they recently just announced the first cohort of winners for their Downtown Boost program, which stands for the Black Owned and Operated Storefront Tenancy. So that program's granting up to $50,000 to 5 Black entrepreneurs to aid them in the long-term success of creative storefronts in downtown Baltimore. And it also served just to bring people back to downtown and see the new excitement and new things that are going on in the city.
That's vital. I think our downtowns, typically our downtowns are sort of some of the, sort of oldest crossroads within our communities. They represent the diversity of those communities. And I think as we see some of these challenges, sometimes it is some of those businesses from different groups within the community that may be sort of impacted more than some of the businesses that service some other groups. And so ensuring that we can bolster that and build on that and bring those businesses forward. It maintains the diversity in our downtowns, and it really helps to focus on one of the real strengths of downtowns that we heard from the engagement was around the power of local and the power of that diversity. And downtowns offer something that you can't find in a regional mall or in other sort of retail areas within many of our metropolitan areas, and it is that diversity. And so by allowing to focus on equity, we're also helping to maintain a vital level of diversity, which is a vital sort of marketing and strategic advantage for our downtowns.
So what should engineers be looking at in their designs in terms of urban management and recovering from this pandemic, as well as possible future pandemics?
I think the key is to focus on flexibility and adaptability, and really putting the human scale experience front and foremost. So in the pandemic, there was that explosion of open streets, outdoor dining, streetery programs, all of these things that brought people into the street. Something that obviously a road space was not originally intended for. But so how can we make it easier for these kinds of programs and these things that people really crave? And frankly, in the pandemic situation, that being outside was safer than being inside. How can we create these spaces and have more space for people-focused uses? I think also another aspect that was on an upward trend and will continue to grow is planning ahead for active mobility. So being really proactive in engineering and design to include active mobility, include walking, biking, scooters, and whatever else may come in that micro mobility sphere.
Yeah, I agree, Kathy. I think I think one of the things that our retailers in our downtowns started to really realize is I think we started to poke a little bit at the idea that all of their business comes by personal vehicle, and they started to see that the amount of business that could be had via pedestrians, via cyclists, by others. And so I think there's a bit more perhaps willingness to forego a bit of parking in some areas in exchange for providing access to customers through other means. And so that concept of flexibility, so that our streets can change and react and mold over time, designing so that they can be closable on a Saturday to allow for the kinds of things that we've seen during the pandemic, and perhaps maybe open back up on a Monday when traffic flow is maybe a bit more important. I think the other piece of this is really about the forward planning, and I think as we go forward, funding and other sorts of programs at both the national and state and provincial levels are going to see, I think, hopefully, a lot of investment in infrastructure within our downtowns. And so ensuring that these downtown organizations and the different stakeholders there have done a bit of thinking to position themselves to take advantage of some of that funding as it comes forward, and be able to sort of strike while the iron is hot and ensure that some of these vital investments in our downtowns are able to be made. I think, just as the Canadian, I'll also mention that the idea around thinking through how our streets can be more usable in the colder months, I think is another really key aspect that, we tried a number of makeshift items through the wintertime, through the pandemic. I think we can continue to innovate in that space to ensure that public spaces are even more active through 365 days of the year, rather than just in the summer and spring months.